look, it was really interesting going back and doing my research on you. I think the obvious thing is, your time, different stages of your life. And I think a key element of that is the time in Tassie. I know you're a family man and you'd love to still get back to Tasmania.
Yeah, absolutely.
You spoke about in other interviews about your dad, his hospitality background, and sort of, I was curious as to what you thought you were going to be when you were a kid.
Look, I think the challenge for me was I really didn't know. I remember there was sort of this, I guess, fork in the road moment in my late teens. I did a lot of work for Dad. I remember I got home from school one day, and I must have been 14, and I asked Dad for pocket money. I remember saying, my friend so-and-so gets $50 a week pocket money, which was a lot of money back then. It would have been 1994. And,
significant.
Yeah, significant amount of money. I was obviously picking my friend that got the most amount of pocket money to make my case as strong as possible. And I remember Dad grabbed me by the back of the neck, not aggressively, but he was a pretty hard man, my dad, and threw me in the back of his car and drove me down to a friend of his who had a pub. Big Kiwi bloke called Brent, big beard, he would have been 130 kilos, and he said, "Burge, this guy needs a job." And Brent said, "I'm a bit busy at the moment, Andrew. Tell him to come in and see me the next day." And he sort of looked me up and down. He was giving me the once over. And so I went back the next day and I'd put a resume together. And he went, "What's that bloody bullshit? If I need more toilet paper, I'll ask for it." He goes, "Can you wash dishes?" And sure enough, that was sort of my first job. And I was a dish pig, as it was so eloquently put. But for him for the next 4 years while I was in, doing years 9 to 12 at school. And I loved every second of it. And I mean, the message there is that's just who my dad is. He didn't want to give me the easy way. I often thought growing up how unfair it was, how hard done by I was, how hard he was. And I absolutely thank him for it every day now, because there is no way I would have most of the things I have now if it wasn't for that toughness and that perspective that he taught me in my younger years.
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing that my dad gave me. It's not so much toughness, it's just a dose of reality, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you need to understand the value of money, and and it's funny, I'm now going through it with Evie, my little 14-year-old, private school life and all this kind of stuff, and you got to make sure that they keep perspective. I mean, they have this crazy thing on Snapchat which just absolutely blows my mind, where you can, I don't do Snapchat so I'm a bit unfamiliar with it, but she can see where all of her friends are at any given time. And I don't mean the country, I mean the actual, home address, if you want to zoom in that far. I mean, they can choose whether that's exposed or not, but she knows where all her friends are on holidays.
Oh, wow.
So, it's a 5-degree day in Melbourne. Oh, look at my friends who are in Hawaii and Greek islands and all this kind of stuff. And you need to say, look, you've got to have a bit of perspective. We are so fortunate and such lucky people. Yeah. There are so many people out there less fortunate than us. Let's not get caught up with the 1% of 1% that happen to be in Europe or Hawaii or something like that. We have an amazing life and we need to appreciate that. And Snez and I are really big on making sure we drill that home, because neither of us came from a lot. We weren't hard done by, but we had to appreciate the value of money and, work up. I remember, when I was 18, I had Centrelink payments coming in, zero money, wasn't sure where, my rent was going to come from. And, I really had to sort of hustle, and it wasn't until I really became a personal trainer and I first started making some half-decent money for the first time in my life that it all kind of clicked. You
said I can't remember what the interview was. It was with a woman about, I feel like it was training kids.
Yeah, right.
But, there was something there where you spoke about how basically life does change when you have kids. Just on that point about applying it to to Evie as well.
Yeah.
Applying lessons to her. And I think it's so interesting that you would it's clear in the last few years that perspective about family has changed you as an individual. Like you went from worrying about other people and what they think to just what your kids think about you. So like I'm curious then if that is in your mind when you become a parent, and it's something that, you know, Lauren and I may have over the next few years, is, you know, how do you principally apply it? Like how do you make sure that they've got that perspective?
So for me, I think the context of how I answered that question that you're referring to would have been in two ways. The first is what we're talking about with Eve, and that is now having a understanding all these years later about why my dad was the way that he was, and, you know, almost, as everyone says, I can't believe I've turned into my parents, but it's that
true though.
It is. It's true.
Happens.
And you know, I've said to my dad, I don't let these things go by without acknowledging them. I've called my dad and I've said, I now realise the challenges that you faced, you know, how hard we made it for you, and I now have those challenges myself, and I have such a different appreciation of it. And it wasn't an apology, but I think that acknowledgement, you know, went a long way, and my dad appreciated it. But so it was twofold. So that with Evie, I've been thrown in the deep end there because I went from not having any kids to having a 10-year-old. And Evie's now 14, you know, so she was nearly 11, and, you know, 3.5 years later, here we are, and she's now a teenager and turning into a young woman. So you don't really have an apprenticeship, I guess. You really have to kind of, I mean, I've relied on Snezana a lot, who's an incredible mum, but you know, you've got to get up to speed really, really fast and pick that up. And then with little Willow coming along and another baby due in, I think, you know, two weeks from Monday, that's given me a complete different perspective on life and what's really important in life, because I've been a bit of a workaholic and highly ambitious, and I definitely think part of that's been good because it's kept me driven and kept me accountable and made sure I haven't really sort of deviated from my goals too much and all that kind of stuff. But then when you have kids, you very quickly realise, and this is from Evie and Willow, they've both taught me this, just what's really important in life, and that these material things and the money and the success and all this other stuff really just pales into insignificance. And I know it's a cliche, but I don't think I got that until I really got that. You know, I'd always listen to people say that. I'd always listen to the you know, Richard Bransons and these guys say, look, when you don't chase the money will come. And when you do, and you go, oh, it's easy for you to say, Richard, with all your billions of dollars and all this, you know, you'd be a bit cynical. And then you have this lightning bolt moment that it's like, you know what, that actually is true. And you almost need something in your life that you love so much more that it just changes your perspective. And because I was single and didn't have kids, it was work, and in an unhealthy way. I definitely don't think I had a really well-rounded perspective, particularly compared to how I do now.